Hello. Now, still got a bit of that cold. Before I start, I'm going to say something which is going to be heartily ignored by a lot of people of bad faith. But I've got to say it anyway. And the people who are sensible don't need it. And I'm sorry for labouring the point here. It's about Greta Thunberg. When I did my piece about her a couple of videos back, I particularly I explained that she had a very mild form of autism, Asperger's syndrome, which makes her a little more, at her age, a little more susceptible to suggestion, and also it renders her a little less talented in reading people's motives. I know a couple of people with Asperger's, and I could see, children of friends of mine, I could see the progression of their condition. When they were in their teens, they still did not have the grasp of social interaction that most non-Asperger's teens have. They had to, it didn't come naturally. So, for instance, if I'm in a social situation and I'm talking to somebody, I might form the opinion that this person is lying to me. I will not know why, but there will be something in the minute movement of their face or their body disposition, or I don't know what it is, but I have the feeling that they're lying because I'm reading subliminal body language messages. People with Asperger's very rarely can do that. It's somehow missing from their vocabulary. Now, as they get older, they learn how to do this as an artificial exercise rather than it coming naturally. So it's like somebody learning to walk, for instance, after they've had an accident and they have to relearn it. They become efficient walkers eventually, but they have to do it by thinking, right, now I lift my left leg, now I lift my right leg, now I lean forward a bit, now I lift my left, you've got to think it through. And that's how people with Asperger's very often have to negotiate social situations. And then after a while, it becomes very, very quick and they can do it like anybody who doesn't have Asperger's, mostly. But there are always minor difficulties. I know about this. I've seen it happening. Now, Greta Thunberg has Asperger's, apparently, and it's a mild form. And I do not blame her for being suggestible. And I do not blame her for being obsessive, because these are both characteristics. And I do not blame her for being really, really, really worried, because another thing about Asperger's, not all, of course, but in general, there is very little sense of proportion. When you have Asperger's or autism, the smallest thing gets honed in on and then concentrated on in a way that doesn't happen to people without this condition, because they're aware of all sorts of other things going on around them. They have some perspective. And Greta probably has less of a sense of perspective than less intelligent non-Asperger's people. Now, Greta is being hailed by the Swedes as some sort of national hero. And my video about her, I said this was wrong. And I've had a lot of people, well, not a lot, I've had some, as I said, willfully misinterpreting what I was saying and insisting that I was a terrible person for criticising a child. I wasn't criticising her. I was criticising her awful parents and the opportunistic people who surround her, who are making much of her. And my feeling is that this is something that's going on among the Swedish intelligentsia, because what's happened is they wanted to make themselves, what did they call themselves? A moral superpower by taking in all those immigrants. And then they suddenly realized they had terrible trouble with all those immigrants, whom they had taken in with no control and no planning. And their immigrant situation is now quite difficult. It's costing the Swedish state a lot of money. It's skewing the social system very badly. Girls are apparently dyeing their blonde hair black to make themselves less vulnerable to male passers-by, let's put it that way. And girls are being advised not to go out on their own anymore. I mean, this is a total change in Swedish society. And I think a lot of the intelligentsia who were pushing for this are now pulling back, but they still want to feel like Sweden has some great moral mission on the planet. So now they're switching from bringing in all sorts of people from all over the place to the eco-warrior thing, and they found their hero in Greta Thunberg. By the way, before somebody else said, I am not against immigration. I do wish we'd have taken more Syrian Christians in this country, and I think I mentioned that in several of my videos. And I wish that Sweden had taken more Syrian Christians. They needed our help. And instead we were taking a lot of people who simply hate the West. They're here to get money and they hate us. And we know that now. Well, a lot of us knew it already. And some of them, of course, are here to work hard and make their way. Yes, I know. But the lack of control and the lack of planning and the idea, well, you can bring them all in and dump them in some housing estate, or, in Germany, they're in the warehouses and that sort of thing, and then expect them to act properly and decently like good German citizens. It wasn't ever going to work. And now it's got to be mopped up. And I notice quietly things are sort of, they're being more ignored now. And I understand that some of the immigration is tightening up a bit as well. But meanwhile, Sweden cannot, just a minute, I'm going to have to freeze this for a moment. So Sweden knows that its moral superpower status is being challenged by the mess that it has made of the immigration crisis. So now they want to be superheroes again. This time they're going to be eco-superheroes. Of course, most ordinary Swedes, they can see what's happening here, but somehow they don't dare to say anything. The number of comments I've had, or even emails, straight private emails from people who say, I live in Sweden and I know this is all rubbish, but I can't talk about it with any of my neighbours. My question is, how do you know your neighbour doesn't feel the same way? Well, yeah, everybody's frightened of each other in Sweden. I mean, Sweden's had this sort of nice, sort of Scandinavian equality, all clean and IKEA sort of version of the world. As a matter of fact, Sweden has always been governed in very authoritarian ways throughout its history. And I'm not sure whether I said this in another video. It was one of the last country, I think it was the last country in the world to actually practice eugenics. They would arrest substandard women of various sorts, mentally deficient or the wrong type of person, and they would sterilize them forcibly or con them into being sterilized. A lot of semi-literate women from there's a sort of a group, the Sami, in the north of Sweden. They're not actually ethnic Swedes. A lot of them were just sterilised because they were the wrong type of people. And they were told that they had to have this or that medical procedure, but it would be easier if they were just sterilised, and some of them just let that happen because they didn't know. This was happening as far, I think, into the 70s, the 1970s. So, yeah, Sweden has its social authoritarianism, and we shouldn't forget that. And this is, in my opinion, just another symptom of it. I'm sorry, I apologise to all the Swedes who may feel I'm having a go at them. There are things I can criticise in British society as well, but I am concentrating at the moment on Greta Thunberg. So she's from Sweden, and this whole thing was sort of blown up in Sweden. So that's why I'm concentrating on some Swedish characteristics which have their problems. Now, I got this in a private email from one of my subscribers. And I don't know whether it's an article. It's a couple of mistakes in the English, but it's excellently written. So it looks to me like maybe a magazine article or a blog article. But I don't know where it comes from, but it says some interesting things. If one was to believe the international media hype during the last year, 16-year-old Swedish Greta Thunberg, who has been lauded and celebrated uncritically on our TV screens, is nothing but a dedicated, unselfish, altruistic activist for the global environment. What has got lost in the media hysteria, whipped up and frothing at the mouth about the environment and this teenage girl's role in all of this, is one simple fact. She is a truant from school every Friday and has been playing truant for quite a long time, an offence that would land a more normal school pupil and her family in serious trouble with the authorities. And that is an important thing. Why was this girl given that sort of latitude? Most kids, however strongly they feel about something, would get into trouble if they refused to turn up at school. Their parents would get into trouble. And you've got kids round here in England having their parents arrested or prosecuted for taking their child to a funeral or to a holiday 2 days before the end of term or something like that. And then this thing says that other children were encouraged to do the same thing. All this is done, or so we're told, without any financial gain or motive on the part of Thunberg, who has a mild form of Asperger's, and therefore could not possibly have any selfish motives. Even the most perfunctory look at the Thunberg myth gives the outline for more murky motives and another story altogether. Both her parents are media-savvy celebrities. Her mother, the opera singer Malena Enman, is no stranger to the screen and the media world, nor is her agent, Greta's father, Svante Thunberg, actor and screenwriter who's appeared regularly on Swedish TV and media. What is less spoken about is that Svante is also CEO of 2 companies based in Stockholm and at the same address and quoted on the Stockholm Stock Exchange. Now, I looked up what the 2 companies were, and I discovered that Svante Thunberg is the managing director of Ernman Production AB. Well, that's reasonable. They've got a production company, which obviously they would use for their media work. And then Northern Grace AB, both publicly traded companies in Sweden. It says here, both companies have the same address in a prestigious district of the capital of Stockholm, which is where they live, I think. The shares of both companies have seen an immense increase since Greta first appeared. The financial indicators have raised dramatically. So, Ernman Productions, I understand. But I looked up Northern Grace AB. I have absolutely no idea what that company trades. It's a company, it's got a financial report. I looked that up, it's all in Swedish. So maybe I'm just missing something because I can't speak Swedish. But it doesn't actually seem to do anything. It seems to be a company that has shares that doesn't do anything, although it's on the stock exchange. So it's getting whatever income stocks get. And that seems to be a little odd. I mean, does it make nuts and bolts, for which Sweden is famous? They're very good quality. No, none of that. Sweden has a manufacturing industry. It's got some huge businesses, and I don't know what Northern Grace does. Okay, but it does say both of these companies are linked to daughter Greta's antics and campaigns. Well, you can see from this word antics that whoever's writing that is not sympathetic to the Thunbergs. And so we have to allow for a certain partiality in this. But I too am quite concerned about the behaviour of her parents. So antics, yeah, maybe not. Greta is a lucky girl. Yet another company. Now, We Don't Have Time AB has been set up by her busy farmer as a PLC, that is a company with shares, on the exchange, and its share price has risen too, in step with Greta's activities. Naturally, this entity and the others are presented by the Thunbergs as being purely altruistic and without a profit motive. And then, strange as all PLCs have to make a return to stay afloat. So I think what this person is saying is that it's not a charity. It's a public limited or liability company, or whatever PLC stands for. Meaning it has to make a profit for its shareholders. Now, I don't know who its shareholders are. And I don't know what sort of a profit they expect. Greta's parents have also, in the interest of the environmental struggle and their daughter's cause, co-authored a book about her crusade for Mother Nature called Scenes from the Heart. That, no little thanks to Greta's various campaigns, have not surprisingly ended up as a bestseller. I think there's a mistake here. Wonder would happen. I think it means wonder what would happen to the paperback sales figures should Thunberg stop sailing across the Atlantic or make incendiary speeches. Well, again, it's a little snide, but it's true. There is no doubt that that book will be selling like hotcakes and making some sort of a profit for the Thunbergs. Indeed, a cynic would wonder at all this and ask a pertinent, nay, disrespectful question. What happens to the profits from the three companies and the book sales? If the Thunbergs are altruistic as they claim, then every penny or cent or euro generated should go to environmental charities, projects, recycling plants and generation plans. Absence of such news speaks volumes about the Thunberg family's real motives. Well, this is very critical of the Thunbergs, and somebody might be able to tell me something on the nicer side. But the fact is, I've been trawling through what I could of Swedish writings about this, and some German stuff as well, very critical of the Thunbergs. And as I said, I got a bad feeling about them even before I knew that much about the whole situation, about a month ago now, I think. And the whole problem is this. It's that they're using an immature, highly focused, and probably slightly unhealthy child as their front man. She's like Wonder Woman. a flick of her wrist and she deflects all the bullets, because you can't attack a child with Asperger's. And Sweden, or rather the intelligentsia of Sweden, have embraced this because it makes them feel more important and better than everyone else, just like they tried to do with the refugees. If you want to donate or contact, the information will be rolling over the Graniopteryx as I speak. Please like, subscribe and share, because it does help with the algorithm. If you visit my channel on YouTube and one day discover that I've disappeared without warning, you'll still find me on BitChute or Minds. Just go to either of those platforms and do a search for Graniopteryx. If you're already watching this on BitChute or Minds, good for you. Meanwhile, if you're watching this on YouTube, remember that you must keep checking the subscribe and bell icons, because occasionally they reset. Till next time.